is House Bill 714 by Representative Cruz. It is relative to gold and silver currency to provide for definitions, to establish bullion and specie as currency, to provide for administration, to permit redemption of currency for other legal tender, to provide for valuing currency, to provide for exemptions, to provide for administrative costs and fees, and to provide for related matters. Members, there is a set of technical amendments on this bill. It is amendment set 1574. It is online and has been distributed to members. It has 7 amendments in this set, and again, they're all technical in nature.
And I'll offer up 1573. Any objections to those technical amendments? Seeing none, adopted. I think we have a second set. Ms. Clerk, will you read it? Representative Cruz, on your bill, let's go ahead and hit the bill first, and then we'll come up and take up the amendment, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great, appreciate it. Members, thank you so much for hearing me today, Mr. Chairman. I think we sit today at a historic opportunity for Louisiana. And I say that because states all around the nation have been looking at this issue. I've got a list of about 22 of them in different stages of consideration. Some have legislation advanced. Some have already built a bullion depository, and some, believe it or not, have already contributed $100 million to their rainy day fund in gold. So you can tell that this is a subject of interest. Lots of people are intrigued by the opportunity, and I, for one, would like to be first. I think that would be a great position for Louisiana to be in. So let me describe just exactly what this is. So the U.S. Constitution tells us, hey, you can use gold and silver as legal tender. It's been that way for a long time, since the founding. But we haven't been able to do it because although it's legal, it's not really practical, is it? It's hard to carry around a gold bar and expect your merchant to accept it for your new TV or your new car or automobile or house or whatever it is. It's just difficult to use. Well, we live in a day now, as you've heard from the previous 2 bills, where things are changed because of the digital age. So now we have an opportunity to be able to use gold and silver digitally. It'll still be there physically, but in order to go to a merchant and present a silver coin, it's just not going to work. But to present a debit card that reflects the actual value of your deposit, that's an easy thing to do. Matter of fact, it can be transparent to the merchant. They can accept that payment just like they would US dollars. It's converted right on the spot. So what we envision here is empowering the treasurer to be able to use this new technology to facilitate this. First, you would be able to have an app on your phone to purchase the gold and silver. And that would be done through a small transaction fee, one that we know is 0.5%. They charge you 0.5% to buy the gold. And then that gold would be put in a depository, secured by armed guards, with well-insured, state-of-the-art facility. And then you would have a debit card issued, hopefully we think, by a Louisiana bank, and that would give you access to those funds. So while gold is a wonderful hedge against inflation that's been proven time and time again, it's not really, I don't see it being used every day because there's going to be a transaction fee. In my particular bank, I don't have any debit card charges on normal US dollars, but this would have a transaction fee. So although it's available, there are always going to be trade-offs. So while the US dollar is strong, people probably use US dollars. Whenever it's weak, they're probably going to want to dig out their gold debit card and use that. Gold has been a great keeper of value for years. It's been treasured because of its beauty, because of its rarity, because of its functionality in making transactions in days of old. But like I said, today it's impractical because of just the size and weight and difficulty carrying it around. I wanted to point you to the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, which specifically says states have this right. They can do that. They can use gold and silver as currency. They're the only 2 metals that can be used as currency, but they can be used as currency. So you might ask, well, how is this different? I can buy gold right now. Yeah, but how easy is it to do, and how easy particularly is it to redeem when it's time that you need it? So we envision a system here where someone may say, you know what, I think inflationary times are getting rough. I need to buy a little gold, as little as $50, $100, whatever you can afford. And you can put that on your card, and then when you find out 2 months later, you're expecting a baby, or your car broke down, or something comes up, you can use that debit card to purchase other things, which you can't do with traditional gold and silver. It's very difficult. So where did this all come from? Well, I actually read this book here, Pirate Money, a while back, and I was floored by the idea. I was like, that's fantastic. You know, we live in a world now where we hear about this CBDC, Bitcoin, all these things, and for many of us, it's a little confusing. Like, what exactly is that? I'd say anybody up there knows what gold and silver are, and they can look at it and know it has value, and it always has. It's a beautiful store of value. So some of the benefits, like I mentioned, are a hedge against inflation, instant access to funds. It's a true store of value. Gold has never been worth nothing. It's not a fractional reserve. When you put your money in a bullion depository, your gold and silver, 100% of it's there. It's not loaned out. No one else can touch it. It is there. You own it. You can go get it. You can redeem it. You can request it shipped to you, whatever. It's 100% there. It should be, we see the law and many scholars think it should be protected against capital gains. That's not what I'm selling it for, but I do think that's true because it's functional and legal if we go with this system. And this system that we envision will be audited regularly by the treasurer. So another thing, since the states around us have looked into this, we found out, you know, we could do this at incredibly low cost. We don't have to build a depository. We don't have to build an app. All we have to do is audit the process, lay out how we want to see it, and audit the process. And you'll see the fiscal note there, less than $200,000 a year. That's incredible to be able to do something like that. So just to give you a little bit more background or answer questions, whatever you need here, the Treasurer, John Fleming, has joined me here, Dr. Fleming, and I've got Woody Jenkins from the Treasurer's Office. Several people have looked at this. We've been in meetings for, I don't know, 20 hours or so with different entities to be able to discuss this idea. We've included Louisiana Bankers Association, individual bankers. So this idea has been heard by many. So I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Representative, and we do have a question from Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Treasurer. So, Chairman Cruz, your bill is attempting to allow gold and silver to be used as currency.
That's correct.
As I'm pulling up Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, my concern is this, and hopefully you can help me. It states that basically no state shall, number one, coin money, and no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debts. So it doesn't appear that the Constitution gives the states the authority to allow for gold and silver to be used as tender.
I would disagree, and I think you're talking about the actual form of the currency.
That's correct.
Okay, so I think most of us here have a lot of money in the bank that we actually never see. We never see those dollars. I conduct my business day to day using a debit card, a credit card, whatever. I rarely have cash in my wallet. So it represents something that is present, but it isn't that itself.
But how do you get around the fact that it's very explicit that, you know, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin as tender to pay for in payment of debts. So the states apparently can use gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debts, but doesn't allow for gold and silver to be used as legal tender. Where does that
Well,
fall?
that has to do with your definition of coin, obviously. You look on your US dollar right now, it says, you know, usable for all debts, public and private, right? But that's not what you actually present to the merchant to buy. You present your debit card or your credit card most of the time representing that physical dollar.
Are we taking the power of issuing tender away from the federal government?
No, not at all, and that's why this Constitution specifically spells out the only thing that states can do is reference gold and silver. We can't print money, that's prohibited.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative McCormick with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Cruz, do you know how much inflation has affected groceries in the last 4 years? Do you know how much groceries have increased in price?
All I can tell you is a lot. My wife tells me about it all the time.
Well, they say 25% is what my numbers say, but I think it's more than that. You know, and you know what the main cause of that increase in grocery price?
Well, most people attribute inflation to the excess printing of the federal dollar. So whenever we give money to another country or another entity. We're just printing money that has no store value behind it.
And that is true. I think that the correct definition for inflation is increase in the money supply. Do you know who can increase the money supply besides the federal government?
Aside from the federal government?
Yes.
No.
The banks can, to the fractional reserve lending system. They can actually create money too. So they've actually been, when the lower interest rates, they were actually a causer of an added cause to inflation. But I appreciate the bill. And found anybody but makers that don't agree with it.
So I do have a follow-up question to Representative McCormick's question. So we know inflation has been I guess a thorn in all of our sides. We're trying to figure that out. But what is the gold spot price today?
I believe it's over $2,200 an ounce.
Would that be a record spot price?
I believe so.
So I guess the point is, everything does go up. We have inflation, but we also have gold prices.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reflect on that a little bit. The way I view gold is a store of value, and its price fluctuates on the worth and the consumer's view of the U.S. dollar. So the dollar actually decreases or increases in value, which is reflected in the gold price. So as we have less confidence in the dollar, the gold price apparently goes up because we have less confidence in the dollar. It's worth less.
So I'm definitely not an expert, but I did read an article, I think today in the Wall Street Journal, that talked about the future of gold prices and interest rates in our country. And they're predicting gold prices actually rise if we do start this interest rate reduction, if we have the 3 this year. So I'm just, and I guess I'm just, other than trying to point the fact out that the market does kind of correct with some of this stuff. But I'll let, we have quite a few other questions, so I'll let Representative Ryder ask.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Cruz, one of my concerns is it is a commodity. And so when you're talking about protecting against long-term against inflation, I think it's a hedge. So you do not have to be an accredited investor to do this, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So somebody comes in, we've got low incomes inside this state, unfortunately. Somebody comes in and puts 10,000 into it, and they're living off disposable income is very marginal, getting through it. So they're having to spend that money in and out of this account. Then you have a 20% reduction when they get ready to spend it. So are they really truly knowledgeable in the investment they're making? I think you can make this investment right now. If you go to whatever your stockbroker is, you can invest in, buy gold and silver both. You can set an account up just as you're mentioning here. So that opportunity to do so, I think, is already present before us in current law.
Hey, Representative Reiser, I want to make sure I'm not seeing this, I'm not wording it as an investment. Some people will, but I've seen it as a hedge against
I think that's
inflation.
what people could be. If you're not an educated investor, sometimes I don't, that's from the consumer point of view.
Sure, and gold can go up and down, there's no doubt about it. You gotta be ready for that risk, but at the same time, long term, it holds its value better than the US dollar.
But my point is back to it, not being argumentative, but most people, the average person's not gonna be putting in a saving account for a long-term investment. Like they're in a money market checking account or whoever it might be. You could get high level risk with somebody. Mr. Treasurer, go ahead, John, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Reiser. Critical point, and you'll see in my testimony that there have been 2 problems with owning gold and silver as an investment. Number one, where you hold it. You put it under your bed, you can bury it in your backyard. And number 2, when you buy it, you have to pay a premium to buy it. When you sell it, you have to pay a premium. So you have to hold it for quite a while. Compared to some other investments or assets like real estate, because of the transactional cost, it really takes away from the value. What we're going to talk about in my testimony is how that's fractionalized. It's held in a depository, and when you convert it to purchase using a debit card, those transactional costs and the issues relative to holding and keeping it safe go away. So I'm going to address that in my remarks today.
You'd rather wait to get your remarks, get those? But Chairman Cruz, you rather wait to get before I ask Treasurer more questions?
I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I'll yield now, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative,
Would you mind if the treasurer made his remarks at this point, Mr. Chairman?
so we do have an amendment set that we have to adopt, before that, if you're good with that. Ms. Kelly, would you read it in, please?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is amendment set 1555. There are 8 amendments in this set. Amendments 1, 3, 4 and 4 are technical. Amendment 2 requires the treasurer to implement rules that prohibit the sale or distribution of a depositor's financial information or related data. Amendment 5 adds that the treasurer shall not authorize or implement any rules or have any duties beyond those rules and duties required to make gold and silver a means of currency in the state. Amendment 6 prohibits a depository, the treasurer, or his appointee from investing deposited funds. Amendment 7 provides that the depository shall not withhold the currency of any depositor or impose a waiting period on a depositor for the withdrawal of his currency. And Amendment 8 adds that the state shall not incur any additional costs to the state general fund to administer the provisions of this proposed law.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, these amendments were introduced to do a couple of things. One, we want to make sure people see it as a form of currency. This is not an investment setup. This is not attempt at a state bank, anything like that. It's just simply the minimum we can do to set up gold and silver as currency in the state of Louisiana. Privacy is of the utmost, so we don't want to be any sale or distribution of depositors' information. And I put clear delineation that the Treasurer's Office is set up to implement this gold and silver as currency and nothing else. Nothing else is allowed beyond that. This is just what we need to do to make that happen.
All right, I'll offer up 1555. Any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Mr. Treasurer, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me say, some of these questions will be addressed beyond Representative Reiser. And so it's important to listen to the details here where we deal with some of these issues that are brought up today. So, Mr. Chairman and members, I'm here today to speak on House Bill 714, authored by, of course, Representative Raymond Cruz, that offers something to the people of Louisiana and the USA as a whole that is quite unique in history. The creation of the first state gold currency platform. For 5,000 years, people have valued gold for its beauty and its utility. In more modern times, people are seeking gold as a hedge against inflation in times of economic calamity. Gold is today a $10 trillion business, very popular. Tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of people around the world keep gold as a store of value to try to preserve and protect a portion of their life savings. In your legislative district, there are undoubtedly thousands of people who own gold, yet they are unable to take full advantage of its use. There have always been two problems with gold. First, how do you store it safely? And second, how do you use it in ordinary commerce? It appears that modern technology now has presented solutions. The price of gold is now just under $2,200 an ounce. While gold value has fluctuated in the short term, through history, its value against all currencies has steadily increased, making it a natural hedge against inflation. However, the federal government has and will likely continue to run very large annual deficits for many years to come, leading to continued periods of inflation. We have all observed how corrosive inflation is to family budgets as household buying power continues to diminish. We are now witnessing the buying power of the dollar to current level of only about 80% of what it was when President Biden took office 3 years ago. While the value of gold appears to go steadily up, the truth is that the value of U.S. currency is actually going down relative to gold and other hard assets, such as real estate. That is why people seek to protect their savings from inflation by putting some of their money in gold. Moments ago, I said there were two problems with gold. First, how to store it safely, and second, how to use it in ordinary commerce. Those problems have indeed now been solved through technology. Louisiana, if this bill is enacted, could take the lead in being the first state in modern history to create legal tender through the use of gold. Why is it important to make gold-backed currency a legal tender through the Treasury of Louisiana, or other states for that matter? The simple truth is that there are companies that store and create digital transactional gold ownership in operation even today. However, any increase in gold value through a commercial company has one drawback. Its increasing value will lead to capital gains taxes on realized profits because it is recognized as a commodity instead of a legal tender. There are experts in this area that believe that if gold-backed currency is used as a legal tender, which can only be accomplished through state treasuries according to Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, it is not taxable on appreciated value. A few years ago, the state of Texas authorized the construction of the Texas Bullion Depository near Austin. That facility, built at a cost of $18 million, has been open for several years. Its security has been compared favorably to Fort Knox. It receives deposits of gold, silver, platinum, and palladium from people all over Texas and all over the United States. Everything there is segregated fractionally and digitally by the name of its owner. That is, according to the name of its owner, assigned digitally and fractionally to that ownership. The gold is not owned by the state of Texas, but by the depositor. Everything there is insured by Lloyd's of London. Other secure depositories also exist around the country, including 4 gold depositories maintained by Brinks. When you deposit precious metals at the Texas Bullion Depository, it is not an investment. It is not making money. Rather, it is preserving value and protecting that wealth against inflation. So the problem of storage of gold has now been solved. There is no need any longer to hide gold under your bed or in the backyard. Now enters the world of technology, computers, smartphones, and the internet. Today, you can access your bank account online or on your phone and securely transfer funds. You can use your credit card or debit card to purchase things around the world instantly. Innovations such as PayPal and Venmo carry all of this to yet another level. Here's a real-world example of how you can use this technology even today. There's a company called Glint, spelled Glint. You can look it up, which has some competitors as well. You can download the Glint app onto your phone and transfer dollars to your Glint account. Once there, you can move your dollars to gold to gold on deposit in a secure gold depository. That gold can be stored at the depository indefinitely. At a depository such as the Texas Bullion Depository, it is safe and insured. Glint and its competitors have created fractionalized ownership of gold such that they can issue you a debit card that can be used to spend any place and at any time against your gold deposit. Meanwhile, it's appreciated against the currency of value. This allows you to make ordinary transactions anywhere with simply a MasterCard or debit card. If a merchant or other seller desires gold, you can make transaction in gold. If they desire dollars, you can make the transaction in dollars. If you move from gold to dollars or dollars to gold, there is an instantaneous transaction based on the current rate of exchange plus a very small fee. In addition, when your debit card is used, you pay a transaction fee just as you would on any purchase with a debit card. But the fee is much lower than that of credit card fees. This is where the state of Louisiana comes in. My interest as your treasurer is to help our citizens hold gold safely and have access to their gold 24 hours a day. But my interest is also to help ensure you will not be taxed unnecessarily on realized gains as you now can be for simply holding and selling gold. As mentioned before, the key reason for Louisiana and other states to consider the law goes back to the U.S. Constitution itself. Article 1, Section 10, gives states the constitutional power to create currency if backed by gold or silver. The Constitution says that the currency is legal tender. Legal tender is money that the courts of the nation are required to recognize in payments for all debts, public and private. When a state issues legal tender and it is used transactionally, there's a strong argument that under the tax laws, any increase in the value of that currency over time is not a capital gain. As I am not a tax accountant or lawyer, I make no representations that such transactions will not be taxable. However, there are some who believe this to be the case. That question will ultimately have to be settled through the IRS and the courts. Apart from the question of avoiding unnecessary capital gains tax, there are three more reasons to take this bold step for Louisiana. Firstly, it is reasonable to expect that due to the popularity of gold ownership as a hedge against inflation, Louisiana will attract considerable capital investment in gold and other investments in Louisiana, spurring our economy. Secondly, our department is already being approached by outside interests to accept digital currencies as payments and transfers. We must prepare for any myriad of currency technologies of the future. Thirdly, there will be considerable small transactional fees coming to the state treasury, similar to what we receive today from other sources such as when we pass through the revenue above our operational costs onto the state budget, just as we do with many other services. Let me explain further in detail what I mean. As you may know, the Louisiana Department of Treasury operates almost entirely on self-generated funds and uses almost no tax dollars. In fact, the department not only provides $14 million for operational expenses of the Department of Treasury, but produces another $19 million for the operation of state government. Above all that, our investment of state funds should produce more than $400 million for the state this year. While there would be some moderate startup costs to begin the Louisiana Treasury's Gold Currency Platform, we expect there to be a net increase in revenues to offset startup and operational costs. So now everything is in place to do something that will dramatically protect the rights of our citizens, secure storage facilities for gold, a platform that allows us to access our gold online at any time of the day or night, and possible tax advantage that might protect your gold against unfair taxation on artificial capital gains. This legislation is meant to empower and modernize the Louisiana Department of Treasury to move to such a system for the benefit of our citizens. Bear this in mind, the system outlined in the regulation does not envision the state of Louisiana doing any of the following. Number one, buying of gold, investing in gold, storing gold, selling gold, or becoming a state-run bank. Rather, the state would contract with an entity such as the Texas Bullion Depository under the comptroller of the state of Texas to store gold for individuals and businesses that want to store gold there. The gold on deposit would remain always the property of the depositor, not the state of Louisiana nor the state of Texas. Likewise, the state would contract with Lint or one of its competitors to provide card services to Louisianans and others who desire to have a gold account and access that gold at all times. There are some critics who fear that Louisiana will create a state-run, state-owned bank. As a small government conservative, I want anything but another government-run institution. As I've explained to critics, the Louisiana government should not attempt in any way to function as a bank and certainly not become a lender. I would be happy to endorse a statute or an amendment to that effect. As I close, I would like to emphasize to everyone that many other states are looking at this And Texas is very close to putting this into law. I think it would be a huge advantage for Louisiana to take the lead and be the first in the nation to provide gold as a legal tender through its state treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm gonna ask each one of the questioners if the question is for you. Representative Avery?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, I guess I just want to be clear. I had some of these questions already formulated before I just read your statement and listened to you. So one of my questions did center around becoming a state-run bank. So explain to me again, how does this program not put us in a position to become a state-run bank? Because you said you envisioned it would not.
Right. Yes. Well, we would have no characteristics of a bank. We would not lend. We would not create mortgages. We would not store money or gold. We would be simply a facilitator of these gold transactions, and the gold would be held elsewhere, perhaps in Texas or another state, unless we, for some reason, built a depository like Texas. So our only function would be as an intermediary, as an entity that facilitates this and meets the requirements set out by the Constitution of the United States.
So the next question I had written down, but I'm assuming when he says about a cost, my question would have been, what would this be a cost to the state? So you're telling me that although there'd be some initial startup costs, you believe that maybe fees collected would somehow pay for this, and this wouldn't be a cost to the taxpayers to start this up?
Yes, on the contrary, it would actually create more revenue to the state treasury because the expected transactional fees, which would be minuscule de minimis compared to what you pay today to credit card companies, because of the size of and the scope of the transactions. Even small fees would be more than enough to handle the ongoing operations. We anticipate only hiring one FTE, and that going beyond that, there would be more than enough revenue, which we would then pass on to the state budget.
Now, another depository is in Texas. That is, I guess, a suggested place to house this. But I think in some of my research, and I wrote down my question is, it looks like this was attempted to be passed in Texas and failed. And so, I guess, and they have a depository. So,
Yes,
I guess, and you just mentioned that, I guess, Texas was close to doing this.
Yes, a couple of comments, and I don't know everything there is to know about that, but number one, I think what happened, the legislation got offset as a result of some other things that came up, an impeachment and so forth, and it just kind of took it off track. And number two, as I understand it, the depository itself is actually owned and operated privately, but is contracted with the state of Texas. Am I correct about that? Yeah, private. Yeah,
Cooperative endeavor agreement.
Right.
Say that again? I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you said.
Cooperative endeavor agreement.
Okay, thank you.
That it's not literally owned and operated by the state. It's really a B3 partnership.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
And Representative Carver for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Cruz. I've enjoyed our conversations about this bill, and I appreciate your openness and willingness to answer them. Good to see you, Mr. Treasurer. And the questions for either of you, like Representative McCormick mentioned, I've heard from a lot of bankers, friends in the banking industry from all over the state. And so I have a couple of questions about the way you envision that program working, because you as the author have mentioned a couple of times, you would hope that maybe local banks, community banks that are headquartered, chartered in Louisiana, that employ Louisianans, contribute to their communities, maybe credit unions as well, would be able to participate in a program. Have you talked to any of them about how they would issue a card in a state payment system that is outside of the banking system?
Well, I've described it to several of them and haven't gotten any, negative feedback or whatnot, so I just assumed it was pretty much how your debit card is. You go to MasterCard as a bank, say, hey, I want to deal with you guys and be able to make and pay things, can you set me up? And it would be a similar thing, so we would make it to any bank that wanted to be able to do that potentially could set that agreement up with whoever the app provider is.
And is it your hope or intention that that would be a bank and not necessarily Glint?
Oh,
Or
definitely.
is Glint a fallback if banks don't participate?
I
or
would
is it your
definitely like
hope?
to see Louisiana banks do it because that transaction fee would benefit our local communities as well as the treasurer. So I think that would be, that's an opportunity that I think's often overlooked as well. If people use these things, people will be making money. This is believe it or not, it's a big shot in the arm for private business. We could have several different potential bidders or participants in providing the gold transaction service and then providing the debit cards. So I think this is gonna be something with opportunity all around.
You answered several of my questions with Abear's line of questioning, but I wondered, have Texas banks engaged with the potential legislation that's moving through Texas at all?
Well,
Are any of you familiar with?
there's someone here that's more of an expert on Texas.
I was just
They can
curious.
talk later.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that as well. And then my last question, and again, it's for anybody. I recognize the fiscal note, for a little bit of startup costs with it, but long-term in the treasurer's testimony, you talked about legislative auditor maybe making trips to Texas to verify and inspect. Those are costs too. Would those be covered by fees, or the hope is that the general increase in state revenues would offset those costs? Is there a direct line item for what the legislative auditor's costs would be for?
It's just anticipated that there would be more than adequate revenue from the transactional fees to cover that and all other expenses. We don't, as I said, we anticipate one FTE in our department, because really what we're doing is in effect contracting everything out.
Sure.
And so the cost to us and the burden to us should be minimal. But if you think of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of transactions that would occur a year, even with small fees, 1% or 0.5% or whatever, that adds up. So we don't anticipate that to be a problem at all, that there would be excess revenues.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Jordan with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, one quick. One, I share some of the concerns that Representative Green has, but you guys just educate me a little bit, because I'm not really that familiar with this. So tell me practically, how would a transaction work, whether it be through Glint or somebody else? I mean, how are you doing that? So I take gold, I'm gonna store gold in Texas at this depository, and then what happens?
So the way we envision this is you get an app on your phone and you, through the app, purchase gold from whatever fund you have. And that gold, you don't have to see ever. It will be put into the Texas State Depository or whatever facility, we contract to do with that. And then you would, through a debit card, have access to the gold you had purchased. Now, to the merchant, it's transparent. If you're buying something for US dollars and they don't have an account and they don't want gold or whatever, they take US dollars just like a regular debit card. So it would be largely transparent to the user how it works. Other than that initial purchase, you've got to go online, do your app or whatever, and purchase some gold in whatever amount you think would be reasonable.
And then you convert it to dollars.
On the fly, 200 milliseconds to make that transaction.
Okay, so,
If I could respond, this is all the gold you'll see is right here.
Okay.
The card, whether you buy it, whether you're buying something with it, it's all transaction through a debit card. And, but the beauty of that is that over time, your budget, your family budget is shrinking before your very eyes. We've seen this over the last 3 years, where your buying power is going down sharply. But see, if it's backed by gold, gold value remains stable against the currency that's going down. So in your eyes, your bank account's actually increasing by simply sitting there. And we've done away with the problem of having to take a gold bar someplace and sell it.
Right, well, I guess I'm just concerned if we're the first, if we would be the first in the nation to create this legal tender system, how it would work for interstate commerce. And I guess that goes back to the original question of whether it's constitutional. Because if we're the first one to do it, and then I go and do a transaction in Missouri, for instance, and they don't have that system set up, I understand you're saying it's transparent to the user, but because you're using that system, and they don't have that system set up, it just seems to me that would interfere in interstate commerce for some, but.
Again, the debit card, which currently would be under MasterCard, it would be usable like it is today, any place in the country around the world.
Right, but then you're telling me that there would be fees associated with the use of the debit card to the user, correct?
Well, I don't necessarily know that it's to the user, perhaps there would be. There's always transactional costs, because you can't run these systems without transactions.
Well, but with regular debit cards, usually, and I don't know about, I assume banks as well, I do know for some credit unions, that they would do it without a fee because they make money on those interchange fees. So for every transaction, when they're doing those interchanges, the more you use it, the more the institution makes, the financial institution makes, and they can pass those savings on to the card user where there are no fees. So would you have a system like that in place? Because now we go into something where the end user may not have any fees to a situation where they're being charged per transaction.
Well, the way I see it, and I have understood this whole way, is you're dealing with like a MasterCard. So it's completely the same, it's gonna look the same to you as a user, other than you know your gold is back in the purchase.
I understand that, but I guess when I'm using my debit card today, the more I use it, the more transactions I use it for, actually I'm not charged any fees. And so by institution. But you're telling me the more I use it under your system, the more I'm going to be charged to use it. So from a consumer perspective, that hurts me more than a regular debit card.
Well, first of all, remember that the value that's backed by gold is going up over time, whereas today, your currency is going down over time. So you have to realize that. But secondly, there's another witness who's much more of an expert on the transactional fees who will be testifying as well.
I just have one more question for you, Mr. Treasurer. And that one is really dealing with storing it in Texas or one of these Brinks facilities or something like that. I would tell you, as a Louisiana resident and for my constituents, I would think that they would want to make sure that the gold was stored as theirs be stored here in Louisiana. And I know you said you're not interested in storing gold, but I guess I'm curious as to why not. If it's going to be ours and it's going to be for the depositor, I don't want, what if the state of Texas for some reason decides they want to secede from the United States or what have you, and then, you know, you don't mess with Texas. So I just want to find out, how do I know as a Louisiana citizen that I would much rather be within the borders of Louisiana?
Well, first of all, again, you own the gold that's in that depository, not Texas.
Yeah, but it's in Texas.
Yes, and number two, we can do it here in Louisiana, but there's a huge startup cost, so you have to decide. We could do it again with low startup costs, and then once we see a high demand, we could always convene again, float another bill, and create one in Louisiana. That's always possible. But I think the risk of being disconnected with your gold ownership is minimal.
All right, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Reiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jordan, I didn't think about that, but Texas does have, when they join, they can secede and they can nationalize it. So that's, I hadn't thought about that. But on the question, Mr. Treasurer, I think we need to be careful in the testimony that we're saying that it's basically foolproof against inflation, because we're talking about somebody on a transactional day-to-day basis using it back for the debit card. So long term, I'm 100% with you. That goes, gonna ride it out. It's a finite commodity that goes back. But let's go back to I think I mentioned before, and you mentioned in your testimony that you weren't accounted or there wasn't precedent for the capital gains. So until that precedent is set, I can see an awful lot of danger. I grew up in the timber business and I saw hands get paid and they felt like it wasn't taxable. 5 years later, they went bankrupt. So they say the court ruled that it was a taxable event. And someone had used that back and forth, it had a 40% gain in it. Now, I would hope that they had a loss, but if they have a loss, they're not gonna write it off either though, if it's under your scenario.
Well, again, I'm not a tax accountant, I'm not a tax lawyer. It would have to be, there would have to be an opinion from the IRS. And then if people disagree with that opinion, and likely either way they would, there would probably be lawsuits. So that's a question that's yet to be resolved, but there are plenty of experts out there who feel confident in the end that it would not be a taxable capital gains. But I'm not here selling that as a known entity, only to say that there is the possibility of that.
So that individual who has an average income could potentially owe a lot of back taxes and penalties.
Well, there's a couple things about that. First of all, the one underwriter we're more familiar with, Glenn, they produce a report at the end of the year saying, here's what your capital gains would be if it's treated as gold. So you want to file that, protect yourself, absolutely, but I guarantee you there'll be someone out there like, you know what, I'm going to push the button and show them this shouldn't be taxable and take it up to court. Whether that wants to be, you want to be that person, I doubt it, but there'll be someone that'll do that. Say,
I think the IRS will do it because it's a commodity.
well, they've actually ruled in an opposite way. I think it was where CBDC, they said, hey, CBDC,
And that acronym is?
Central Bank Digital Currency. They basically said, hey, for something to be currency, it has to be legal tender and it has to be functional. And they said transactional functional, you can use it. So this meets those two requirements. Now, they weren't ruling specifically on this, but they're ruling on another issue and basically proved the case by saying if you have those two components, it's not a commodity anymore, it's currency.
Now, in with this, Mr. Chairman, I'll go back. Let's say you have with a brokerage account. Yes, today as we speak, I can buy silver and gold and set up an account and everything we're talking about, and it is a taxable event.
Okay?
So if that's the case, I think they'd have to reverse the rulings on that wouldn't be a taxable event.
But it's not functional. You can't use that in a transactional manner. That gold, you have to go through and sell it, deal with your broker and all. It's not, you can't go to a merchant and do something with it. It's not currency.
But you still say you'll agree or disagree that it's risk for capital gains exposure?
With our current state of government, there's always a risk.
Well, I understand, Representative Reiser, that yes, you could be taxed on capital gains, but that's only a portion of what the actual profit is. So you're still much better off with gold gaining in value and paying a small tax compared to it going down in value, which is what our currency currently does.
And that's back to, once again, the market fluctuates. Long term, we're 100% agree.
It does, but like real estate, hard assets will fluctuate in the short term, but over the long term, they always go up against currency, always.
But we're talking about bills being due on a short-term basis though. So if you're operating this completely,
Well,
the average income in
it's
Louisiana.
not perfect. All we're saying is that this is an option, it's a freedom that we should offer our citizens.
I just think that the consumer needs to hear what I'm saying.
Sure.
That they need to be, that they don't walk into this, if this was to pass, thinking that I'm protecting myself against inflation, I'm gonna be all right. I wanna say to anyone that's listening, they have great exposure in this. If the market fluctuates during the month, if they want to make a transaction, pay the water bill, the electric bill, whatever it might be, they might be significantly short that month. Now, on the other hand, at the end of the year, they might have a significantly stronger position and could potentially be exposed to capital gains. That's my only point I want to bring up.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Hill, for any quick questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a few questions. In the bill, how is the price of gold set?
It's on the market, instantaneous, like I said, 200 milliseconds.
But which market sets it?
That, I'm not sure about. I'm sure they do it different ways.
I think that's important, though.
Forex or something.
I think, because if you said, what is, we could look at stock markets, for instance. I could say the NASDAQ or the Dow, or is the bullion depository picking the market?
I don't know. I don't know that exactly.
We have another expert I mentioned who will be able to address that.
That seems kind of central to this, you know, to knowing what your value, the value of your gold is. Can the deposits in the bullion depository be borrowed against?
That's gonna be up to the bankers to deal with that, but no, I would say no, but if you're a banker and you wanna secure that gold as collateral, I don't know what they wanna do there. I mean, right now, they'll say, hey, we're gonna use your car as collateral. If you take a loan with us for a car, we can use that as collateral.
Sure, but I'm saying like, because we're bringing this to the bullion depository, and I understand they're not the bank in this scenario, but that's the closest comparison I can draw. And so a bank, if I deposited money in, they can,
Yeah, they can't be loaned out. The gold you put in the depository cannot be loaned out.
so it couldn't be borrowed against them.
Well, I think that's a little different. If I said I had an ounce of gold there and I want to buy a TV and they say, well, we'll forward you the money if you tell us we have the right to that gold in case you default, that's separate. But it can't be loaned out. It's not a fractional reserve.
Okay, so, but it can't be borrowed against not for that user's specific purpose. You buying the TV, it's your gold. I'm saying they, you know, the state of Texas wants to make an investment in some,
No.
something else, okay.
Absolutely not.
So the individual depository, are they insured against the loss? So is that an insurance policy that they then have the right to, and how would they enforce that if, I don't know?
Well, we'll let the experts speak more to that, but the whole depository is insured for all its holdings. They have a policy that covers all the holdings.
But then does that benefit inure to the depositor?
I certainly would hope so. Yeah, you put your physical asset in there.
Remember that the insurance is not a deposit insurance, it's actually insurance on the gold, the physical gold itself. It's Lloyd's of London, it's protected by guards and fences.
Understood. But does they, so the gold bullion depository has a Lloyd's of London policy, but then, I don't know, something bad happens and there's a, you know, a theft or something. And then I had my gold in there. Do I then go to Lloyd's of London? Does the depository go to Lloyd's of London? No.
I don't think we have that detail.
Okay. And then I just wanted, you know, because I read Section 10, Article 10 of the Constitution, and I guess I'm trying to understand, you know, it's one of those things you're trying to understand what the definition of coin is at the time. And when I look up at the definition of coin, it's a flat, typically round piece of metal with an official stamp used as money. And so I guess I'm wondering how the jump gets made from the gold and silver to the coin, with coin having that definition.
In my mind, simply because when you spend with your debit or credit card, you're not having that physical money in your possession. It's a representation of the money that you have.
And just so I'm clear, because I have one final question. So under this scenario, I deposit gold this year. I then go to sell it in 10 years. Hopefully there's an increase in value of that gold at that time. Is that a capital gains event?
Well, we posit that no, because it's being declared currency by being transactional and legal, that it should not be.
But the depositor should understand that there's
Sure.
potentially some legal ambiguity out there regarding that event.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so I'll save those questions I had that you mentioned the expert could
Yes.
answer. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I think that just brings up a couple of questions, and I apologize, the board is lit up. But I just went on the Texas deposit.gov, their website. Looks like they created some pricing structures in 2018 was the last time they changed that pricing structure. But then they talk about insufficient funds, overdraft, late payment, late fees. Is it currently, can I store my gold in Texas and they issue me a debit card?
No, I don't think that's the way it works now. Right now, it's a traditional depository. They sell gold, silver, palladium, platinum, whatever. And it's a completely purpose-based thing for that. We're gonna use it as a depository. More, as they're gonna be custodian for the physical asset while we transact digitally.
They had legislation, Chairman, for that, and again, they got distracted, we mentioned that early. They never got to the point we're trying to get to. but they will eventually.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure this out, because it gets a little confusing. These rules were made in 2018, and you're saying that that's not what they do.
Well, you can buy gold and they will hold it for you and then you can sell it. But the whole idea, the transactional piece of this, where you can use a debit card, they're not there yet. They have not put that into law.
All right. Thank you, Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got several thoughts here. First one, on the Texas Depository, it's my understanding they were storing their gold in another state, and that's the reason they built it, because they were concerned about other states holding their gold, and that's why it was originally built. You know if that's right?
Yeah, they had, somewhere in the northeast, maybe New York or something, they had.
Ooh, I see when I bet it's much more likely they're gonna see it go. The treasurer, you'll be able to audit the gold that's in there, so that's a huge safeguard, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and it's necessary. I mean, we would have to have some way of identifying and assuring gold owners that they have what they think they have. So
Right.
that would be just a bare minimum requirement.
Right, exactly, okay. And as you said earlier, I mean, if this thing, and hopefully we'll get this bill out of committee and keep working on it, and if this was put in place in Louisiana, we could build our own. You're just looking at a startup cost of building one that's not feasible at this time, is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, we want to have proof of model. We want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with this. We don't have to invest $20 million to build a depository to make this successful in Louisiana, but if it is, and you see fit, as a legislature, to create one, we can definitely do that. It would be a second step. We just want to have proof of model here that this actually will work and everybody will be comfortable with it.
And you know, one thing that I'm sure to wind up in court cases, most of the controversial things we pass do. So not voting for the bill because of that is kind of odd. But anyhow, I mean, being able to have currency and not pay capital gains when you buy and sell the gold on the transaction is what makes it impossible for a private industry to do. I mean, there are other industries, my understanding, or other groups that have this same thing, but that those capital gains have to be paid on their transactions. So it's important that we do this in the state of Louisiana, so we have that possibility. And I feel like we won't have to pay capital gains. Do you agree?
Well, I can give you my opinion. I think that what is likely to happen, and again, this is just kind of a guess more than anything, is that day-to-day use and transactions probably will end up not being taxable, but you know, large holdings and large periods of holdings, they may well judge that should, like, because you may be acting much more like a commodity in that case. So this is all just, again, pioneer territory. It's frontier. But again, there's a lot happening, the modernization of currency in this country. The one thing we're the most concerned about, of course, is central bank digital currency, as you've heard testified before. This is another direction of freedom for users and for citizens, and that's what we want, is freedom and safety, which this both provides.
So what you're saying is what I agree with. This is another option for the ordinary men and women, small business owners, to possibly protect their investments against inflation and have the protection of the state to protect them. They have a pretty big stick to fight back with instead of trying to do it individually.
Absolutely, and this should be opaque to government. Government should not be, except to the extent that there's to be money laundering and that sort of thing, which is of course necessary. But with central bank digital currency, you've already heard testimony suggesting that government can control your expenditures, and that's not something that the government should get involved in. This would not go that direction at all. It would be totally independent. It would be a free use of currency and a safe use of currency.
And I would also agree with you that idea is mainstream, that they're going to punish the people that are doing things they don't see appropriate. I mean, this is a chance. I mean, well, one other thing I will say, do you know the only government entity that I've ever known in history in the United States to seize your gold? Federal government did it back in the Depression, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, they bought it all for $35 an ounce and then turned around and raised the price to $70 an ounce. So I believe the feds are who we need to be worried about here.
Right, and let me add this. My parents used to tell me how they had to have coupons in order to buy things during World War II. You know, there's all kind of good reasons to do those kind of things, but you know where they always end up. That is political control of the citizenry, just like we have in China today. So we've got to be very careful about all of these things, and all these ideas. It's neat that we have the technology, but we've got to be careful that it's for the people and not against the people.
And as you're testifying, is what I see it is just another arrow in the quiver of the regular small business owners and working class people to protect their dollars or protect their assets against inflation. Thank you.
All right, Representative Reno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Cruz, for bringing this bill. Thank you to the Treasurer and Mr. Jenkins for being here for testimony as well. I do believe in holding gold and silver as assets against inflation. Matter of fact, I brought this silver coin with me because I saw that your bill was coming up. So I just had a question for the folks like me in Louisiana. If we wanted to get the value of this coin into this depository, how would that exactly work?
Well, right now, I think you'd have to use an ecosystem of maybe taking it to your broker or something to redeem it for US dollars and then buy it through that. So we're not gonna take those physical items and transport them. I guess you could somehow, but we're not gonna take a part in that. We're not trying to touch your money in any way. We're just trying to be the custodian to make sure it's taken care of.
So, and tell me if I have this wrong. So when I purchase it, I'm charged a fee.
0.5%.
Yeah, when I sell it, I'm charged a fee in order to purchase it on the Louisiana depository. So in theory, I'm being charged a fee about 3 times in order to get it onto the Louisiana depository.
You mean if you take that physical one?
Yes, sir.
Say the 3 again, I just see the.
So when I purchase it from the federal government, let's say,
Oh, okay.
I paid over spot price.
Okay.
So I was charged in that instance. Then I take it to a pawnbroker and I'm charged again. And then I gotta take those dollars and then I'm charged again to put it onto the
Correct, but I
depository.
don't anticipate the majority of Louisianans would ever do it that way. They would take their app, buy some gold with their US dollars and convert it over and have it there. Now, they could redeem it and have it shipped back to them that way, and that would probably be a cheaper way to get it. But no, we're trying to make this so any resident anywhere in the United States could have access to gold. And like I said, I think it particularly, and I spoke to every single member of this committee because I don't think this is a Republican or Democrat bill, this is an everybody bill, that anybody could put a deposit into the bullion depository and then with the hopes of hedging against inflation, yet if they do have any emergency or they need access, they have access. It's not like any other traditional investment where you put money in a stock or something, you have to go to your broker, sell it, wait and all that. This would be instantaneous. If you had a car breakdown and you need it fixed, you go take that debit card and do it. It's incredibly convenient to those person of little means to the regular financial system. Do you have
You
something
would
else?
also pay a premium of about 8% when you sell it to the broker. And you'd have to discount it around 8%, which is far more than what these little transactional fees are.
Thank you all so much.
Mr. Chair, could I have Mr. Jenkins speak just for a few minutes? He has a bunch of these questions ready to answer already.
Yeah, you have questions.
Well, we can finish up with those first.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4.
I thought his testimony might
About 8
help.
or 9 more questions.
Okay.
So let's maybe go through a few more if that's okay. And anytime you'd like to jump in on the questions, I'm sure the committee would be happy to have them. Representative Cox.
Yes, sir. I was reading through Mr. Fleming's testimony, and I'm confused because I've been on the Glenn website. Let me pull it back up. can't a consumer in Louisiana right now, if I had a Glint MasterCard, do everything we're talking about right
Yes.
now?
Yes.
That's what's confusing to me. Why do we need this legislation if we can already do it? I'm reading testimony from people that said they were, once their card came in, they made the transfer from their checking account to this, and they were buying coffee, groceries, and their next flight with gold. So what do, if a consumer can already do this by getting a Glint MasterCard, what are we doing here?
Well, we're gonna make it currency. That's the goal of this, make it currency, so you can use it like you just described, but also have what we think is anticipated benefit of no capital gains tax. But additionally, because we'd like some of that money to be in Louisiana, we'd like those transaction fees to be with local banks and make local purchases, and not just go through the MasterCard system to whoever owns it outside of the state.
So the state would contract with Glint or a competitor?
Well, contract or spell out specifications, yeah, we have certain requirements we want them to meet.
Okay, because there's been a lot of questions in testimony regarding how good this is.
Well,
But we can do it now as a consumer. If I had a Glint MasterCard right now, I could do everything we're talking about.
Correct, except call it currency.
But you would,
But, I mean, it is, I'm using it as currency, just like it's my debit card.
Yeah, you can do it that way.
That's what Glint says it does.
Let's envision this though, let's envision Texas is the first to pass this legislation. Where do you think our residents are gonna get their card? Do you think they're gonna go to Glint, or do you think they're gonna Texas Bank and get a debit card from them? That's what I think is the opportunity we really have. Whoever's first in this is gonna be getting all those transaction fees. I'd like it to be Louisiana.
All right, that was my question, because it just seemed like there were a lot of questions in testimony. People didn't know you could already do this with gold. All right, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Representative. So just to clarify what you just said, you want those transactions to happen in Louisiana. Is that, you're talking about through the treasurer?
Well, through the local bank that issues the debit card. They'll collect the fee, and then we'll get a small portion rebated basically back to the treasurer.
We do have, well, it's probably not information, okay, never mind. I was gonna ask the ladies to come up with, because I do have some questions, but we'll continue this line of questioning unless, all right, Representative, Macon, who has been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Cruz, Treasurer Woody. Mr. Treasurer, you said previously they stated gold remains stable. Your bank account is always increasing, going up over time. You're much better off. Those are exact terms when it comes to gold in your testimony today?
my testimony, Representative, is that gold is a hard asset like any other hard asset, silver, platinum, real estate. Its value stays the same. What happens, what makes it appear that it goes up in value, is the currency goes down in value. And we've seen this happen dramatically over the last 3 years with inflation. I'm old enough to remember the inflation of the 70s when it was as high as 11, 12%. People on fixed incomes, people low income, anybody who is on that margin of income is hurt more dramatically by inflation than anyone else. So the point here is that while it appears that gold is going up in value, it appears your house is going up in value, they're not. They're staying the same value. The money that you're spending to buy these things is going down over time. It's buying power. As I mentioned, your buying power has reduced 20% since President Biden took office because of inflation.
So for example, in 2013, the value of gold went down 27%. In 2015, it went down 11%. 2014, it went down 0.19. 2018, it went down 1.15. 2021, 3.51, and in 2022, 0.23. So those people would be better off with this gold account when the gold price is dropping that much.
Again, you heard me say that gold and all hard assets fluctuate temporarily, but over time, if you look at what the price of gold was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was much lower than what it is today. So it's a long-term increase in value against inflation. But can it fluctuate because of temporary economic conditions? No, absolutely it can. With each one of those decreases occurred, but it can also return back to the baseline going up again. So, you know, and this should be disclosed to anybody who wants to use gold in any way or any other hard asset, is that, you know, from moment to moment, from day to day, that value can change, either positive or negative. What we're doing here is, with this new technology, is we're making it a liquid holding, whereas before it was very illiquid and it was very costly to turn it into cash.
So I just want to caution you against that. The only broker sitting up here licensed with my Series 7 to avoid maybe the terms gold remains stable, your bank account is always increasing. Especially when I get to the fees here in a second about this bank account. You said in your statement there's two problems. First is how to store it safely, and second is how to use it in ordinary commerce. I'll agree with you, using gold in ordinary commerce is an issue, but if you do want to wait just a few days, we can get your gold deposits out of where they're held. We can get you the money pretty quickly. It's not that bad of a problem. When you said store it safely, are people currently storing it unsafely in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely.
And how are they doing that?
There are hundreds of thousands of people in this country that have Cougarans and gold coins and gold bars stored at various in their drawers, in their under their beds, in some cases buried. That is not a safe way to hold gold at all, and it is very illiquid. You heard me say typically you lose 8% of its value when you liquefy it, when you turn it into cash.
That's a guaranteed number, 8% loss? Every person loses 8%?
It's typical, yes, typical.
Typical, so not guaranteed you lose 8.
Nothing's 100%.
Okay, let's just try to avoid those guarantee statements while we're talking today. On the security point, you said the security of the Texas depository has been compared to Fort Knox. In the bill, it talks about that you will have the choice to choose a depository that is either any state in the United States or a private vendor whose principal place of business is in this state. So outside of Texas, where else can this money be stored?
Brinks, and they have depositories, I think, in 4 locations.
Well, no, it says a private vendor whose principal place of business, its center of operations is in this state. Is Brink's principal place of business and center of operation in this state?
Look, that may be in his bill, that's not in my remarks, you'll have to ask.
Well, you're the treasurer and you get to choose that per the language of the legislation.
Well, we put out an RFP, we choose the best vendor out there, of course.
But is there any other vendor we can pick from besides Texas Depository?
Well, we've got Texas Depository, we've got Brinks, those are 2 excellent ones, yes.
So to your knowledge, you do not know if Brink's principal place of business and center of operations is in this state, to be able to pick them?
Again, I didn't say that, that's not, if you want to ask Mr. Cruz about that, go ahead.
Well, I know you didn't say it, but you get the option in the bill to do that. Further on, you mentioned Glint, and it's some of its competitors in your testimony today. What are some of the other competitors?
I don't have their names, we have an expert who will testify to give you them.
Okay. We talked about the realized gains. Why do we not have any IRS opinion? Have you asked for one, or why is there no IRS opinion presented today?
This is so new, we've not been able to get that accomplished yet, but we are pursuing that.
Has it been asked for?
Again, we're pursuing that.
So it has or has not been asked for?
Asked and answered.
Okay. You mentioned 3 more reasons for this bold step for Louisiana. That it would be spurring our economy. How would it be spurring our economy?
Well, first of all, there would be a lot of capital flowing to the state, from the state, and it would draw a lot of interest to Louisiana and what we're doing here. Some innovative things in our government. So I think we could draw more industry here as a result of that. The board knows we need it.
You said secondly, our department is already being approached by outside interests. What does that include?
There are people approaching us about accepting digital currency. So we have to modernize what we do in the Treasurer's office.
Then you posted a statement on your Facebook page where you said, whatever depository is chosen, the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office would be regularly auditing the facility and the card provider. What authority do you know of that our Louisiana Legislative Auditor will be allowed to audit the Texas depository?
Well, we'd have to make sure that it comes with law.
So right now, I'm not reading that in the bill, that was just language that you posted, so where does that come from?
We may have to amend it.
Okay. One more for you. Back to, two more. To Reverend Hilferty's question of the value of gold, page 6, line 7, it says, the treasurer shall determine the value of a unit of the currency as published by the depository. So you personally will be the person determining the value of the unit.
Again, you'll have to ask Mr. Cruz, that's in his, that's not my words.
Okay. And then the treasurer may establish a fee, and you also talked about in your statement online the fees involved with this. Do you have any idea what the rate of those fees will be at this time?
We see them as de minimis, less than 1%, perhaps 0.5%, but it hasn't been determined yet. We have to see what the costs are going to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Domingue.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm new to this still. And I appreciate my colleagues' comments and Rep. Cox, you stole my thunder. That was my exact question, sir. And I just echo a lot of the concerns that some of my colleagues have. So as Rep. Cox was saying, I can download the Glint app right now, and I can invest all my money in the Glint app and invest in gold and get a debit card. And I'm not allowed to spend that money here in Louisiana. Yes, so we're already able to do this. And I guess my follow-up questions are for banking. Do we have anybody from banking here? Would we possibly
I
be?
don't think anybody showed up.
We do, and they will have opportunity to speak in just a few
So
minutes.
do you want me to hold my?
Yes, ma'am, if it's a banking related question,
Okay.
you can.
All right, thank you so much.
Representative Thomas with the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a really simple question. Early on, you described this whole thing as a hedge against inflation. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, how does paying with gold reduce the price of milk?
Paying with gold does not reduce the price of milk. It's going to be converted to dollars on the fly, but your holdings will increase in value relative to the dollar with inflation. So where you buy $500, say a year from now, inflation's gone higher, we spent trillions over in Ukraine or whatever, and now your $500 holding is worth $550. So you have more money to be able to buy that jug of milk.
But the price of milk does continue to rise.
It does.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative Knox with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. I missed a lot of the testimony. I was in another committee presenting a bill. And I've listened to the question and answers from my colleagues, and quite frankly, I'm still confused. I'm confused, and I respectfully want to say that by me coming in so late, everything I've heard sounds like a Ponzi scheme. I'm trying to comprehend in my own simple thought process, if we're able to do what you're proposing currently, what's different? I guess if you can help me understand what is different that this bill is going to offer that a consumer in Louisiana can't already do today.
Well, the big thing here is we're declaring this as currency. That's the number one thing here. We're using right there, establishes gold and silver as currency. We're saying, hey, it's transactional. The digital age has brought us there. We already know it's legal. We're marrying those together, and because it's under the Treasury and it's under the state, we're saying this is legal currency.
But if it's on a credit card, it's already used as currency, isn't that correct?
But
and transactional.
there are, first of all, this is a choice. Nobody has to do this. We're offering a choice to the Louisiana citizen, actually anybody in the country that wants to buy this. Do you want your money saved as gold or do you want it saved as US dollars? That's number one. It's a choice granted in the Constitution. I don't know why we would get in the way of someone's rights.
I wouldn't want to get in the way with that, and I actually appreciate backing up with gold because I happen to have a certain belief in that. But my concern is that we're talking about storing this in Texas. Is that correct?
Well, we could store it in a number of places, but this is just, we're trying to make it minimum cost right now. We don't want to do a depository right now. We're trying to get it up and running, and then if the will of the legislature is later to establish a depository, we can do that.
Well, looking on the website of Texas Bullion, they charge $1.37 daily. I'm trying to understand, how does that, for storage?
Well, I'm gonna let the
Storage.
experts speak to that more. I mean, what quantity or whatnot, is it irrespective of the quantity? I don't know.
So I appreciate the fact of Louisiana potentially being the first state to do something first. I really do. My concern is, why hasn't Texas done this, given
Well,
that they have a depository of gold there?
As was mentioned, they were on the road to do that, but then with the Attorney General issues they had and whatnot, they just got sidetracked. So I'm gonna let the expert on Texas come speak to that and address those
But
issues with
to your understanding, Texas plans to implement
That's their intent.
this kind of,
Just to review here, we've got Indiana, West Virginia, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, North Carolina, Ohio, searching into this. Legislation filed in Mississippi, Florida, Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Alaska. Hearings in Kansas and Louisiana right now. Out of committee in Utah and Arizona. Depository built in Texas, and rainy day gold deposits in Tennessee can go to gold. So there's momentum around this country. And I can't imagine a player coming to Kim Mulkey and say, hey, can we go to second this year? I just don't see that happening, so I'd like to be first on this train.
look, I would definitely like for Louisiana to be the first in something, but what brings concerns to me are the remarks made by my colleague, Representative McMakin. He made some excellent points. One concern, as I look in the testimony by Secretary Fleming, it cites Glint as the contractor. And so that concerns me that we're already targeting just one vendor to administer this.
So let me address that. Glenn is an example. We use that as an example. You can download the app, you can see.
Where are they located?
Where are they located? They're located in London.
In London?
But when that time comes, we put out an RFP and we choose the best vendor. We just use Glint as an example. If you want to see more, how, in fact, some representatives have already looked it up. And I welcome people to do that, because I want you to understand, as you mentioned, Representative Knox, there is some confusion about this. And again, let me clear the air on one thing. You can absolutely do this right now today through private vendors such as Glint. So this is not something that's futuristic. This is something that's happening in real time. The reason why a state would want to be involved in this is because as a result of the U.S. Constitution that states that you can issue legal tender through gold and silver, it is quite possible that this may prove to be ultimately a non-taxable transaction when you sell it for a higher value. We want to take advantage of that opportunity. Now, is that a settled issue? No, it is not settled. It won't be settled until we or some other state moves forward on this.
So this would put in a framework to get to where you're describing right now, is what you're saying?
Yes.
But as of now, there's no other state pursuing this legislatively.
Yes, there are many states that are.
There are models of this bill pending
Not
currently in
necessarily
other
this
states.
bill, but at different levels. Again, Texas has gotten as far as having a depository, and they got to this point, and then things got thrown off the rails as a result of their impeachment of their attorney general. They never got it completed, but they're gonna come back and probably get it done. And one thing also I want to mention, because bankers, representatives will be testifying. As I said in my remarks, we're not interested in a state-run bank, a state-owned or state-run bank. We want our Louisiana bankers to do the banking, and we want to make sure that we draw capital that is ultimately going to pass through their banks. So this is not an effort in any way to create a Louisiana government bank in any way.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I saw that in your remarks, and so I was trying to get a visual in my mind. If you're not going in the direction of being a state-run bank, you're only going in the direction to use the terminology that gold can become
Yes.
liquid or currency.
We want
Is
to
that correct?
apply the state aperture that will make it in the category to qualify as a legal tender, which then could make it tax-free on the increase in value.
But the state wouldn't be in the business of banking, meaning
That is
accepting fees
absolutely
and things.
correct, Representative, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, or Mr. Treasurer, you mentioned earlier about hard assets and that real estate and precious metals are considered hard assets. And Chairman Cruz, you touched upon earlier about capital gains. So can both of you kind of explain to me under this scenario, if I were to purchase gold as a means of currency, but I didn't, make transactions with it, but I held on to it for about 10 years, and hopefully under your scenario, your theory is that the price of that gold would increase. If I were to sell it back under that heightened value, and I would obviously get a profit, would I have to pay capital gains on that?
Well, again, that's an open question. If you do it through Glint or any private organization like that, absolutely 100%.
But
it's considered a commodity, and any increase in value of a commodity like real estate, you gotta pay tax. The difference is if it becomes legal tender, it's currency via the state and the Constitution, maybe not, and that's the crux.
So that would be the effect of this bill.
Yes.
So let's say you're a very wealthy individual and you want to do that. You want to purchase gold as currency with no intent of ever engaging in transactions with it, and you use it as a backdoor form of investment. That individual wouldn't have to pay any capital gains tax. It would circumvent, giving the government revenue. Is that right?
That's correct, but
And do you
they're
think
also,
that's fair?
well, we already have mechanisms which you can avoid capital gains tax on hard assets. A good example is the 1031 exchange on real estate, where that tax is not really avoided, but it's deferred by putting that equity into another piece of real estate. But you can do that continuously throughout your life, and the taxes are not due until that real estate is finally sold. So, yes, to me, it's a good thing. I think the less tax you have to pay, the better one will be financially.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative. So there's actually no more questions.
Can I have Mr. Jenkins speak just for a minute then?
I just want to have one, other than mine. So just two things I just want to make sure that the committee understands and everyone. It's your opinion that this may not be taxable, capital gains tax, correct? Okay. Did the AG or anybody weigh into this to say that?
Mr. Chairman, that question was already asked. All of this has come together in a period of about 10 days for us. We just haven't had the time, but we're pursuing that for certain.
So I did talk to the author about that specific issue, the time issue. The only thing I will also add, the deferral, a 1031 exchange is really not an exemption of capital gains tax. All it's doing is allowing you to move from one asset to another asset. So
Yes.
you will be responsible for that capital gains tax when you get out of that asset.
But if you never sell the third or fourth iteration of real estate, you never have to pay that tax.
Well, I mean, that's like any real estate. If you don't sell it, you don't pay capital gains.
Well, if your heirs inherit it, they don't have to pay tax.
Well, they'll pay inheritance tax and they'll pay some other taxes, but we won't get too.
We'll have to debate
Yes, sir.
offline on that one.
Yes, sir. So we do have some green cards. Treasurer Fleming, present, and would like to speak a green card. Mr. Woody Jenkins, Department of Treasury, who's in the green card, present, and would like to speak. Who is now? Sorry.
Thank you, sir. And this is Woody Jenkins, former member of this House for 28 years, and happy to be with the Treasurer today as Director of Governmental Affairs. I want to address, I had some remarks, but I want to instead address a lot of the questions that have been asked. But before doing that, I want to mention something, and that is very exciting about this legislation when you really understand it. There are billions of dollars out there waiting for a safe home to invest in gold. This legislation is unique in providing a safe haven for billions of dollars, not so much just from Louisiana, but from around the United States and around the world. And if we think of this bill just in terms of Louisiana, we're missing really the point. Because by being first, it means that people all around this country will see Louisiana's gold currency platform as an opportunity to put their money in a safe place. The results, I think, will be extraordinary. Let's run through some of the questions that have been asked. As far as this being a bank, obviously there's no legislation to create a bank. This is not a bank. It doesn't meet any definition of what a bank is. That's not a problem. Forget it. This is not a bank. There's no legislation to create a state bank. With respect to, there was a question, one of the representatives asked about storing gold and using it as a basis for a loan.
Representative.
Yeah.
You fill out a green card. Should you be providing information with a white card since you're in a state agency?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, well then I'll speak for information.
I filled out a green card too. I thought that's what I was supposed to. Oh,
But you're an elected
Okay.
official. You're exempt from that rule.
I'm still learning.
Any other state employee needs to fill out a white card, and it's for information only. So if we can do that, right, you can't really take a position.
Okay. Should I proceed, sir?
Well, if we have any questions for you, or if you have a brief statement you'd maybe like to finish up, I'm perfectly fine with that, sir.
Yes. So the Treasurer started with the statement that two problems exist and that they've already been solved, and that was secure storage and a way to access gold as currency. That was the beginning of this discussion. So yes, those problems have already been solved. The third problem is the tax problem, and that's what this bill attempts to resolve. Now we have capital gains that can be realized capital gains or unrealized. If a person right now buys a bar of gold and it's $10,000 and he sells it in 10 years for $100,000, he's got a capital gain. If, however, he's purchased it in a way that is legal tender and is transactional, there's a strong chance, certainly as I read the law, that it's not taxable. That's what constitutes being not taxable, as being legal, is transactional and legal tender. So no one who uses the current system, who wants to store gold at the Texas Bullion Depository, they will pay capital gains. There's no risk. It's just that if they do it through the state of Louisiana, we think there's a very good chance that it won't be subject to capital gains. So there's a great potential advantage by having the state involved in the fact that the state will also generate fees. It's very important to be first, because if Texas does it first, all the money's going to go through the state of Texas, not to the state of Louisiana. As far as why Texas didn't, Texas has a coalition running the House. It's all the Democrats and some of the Republicans. They impeached the Attorney General. They only meet every other year. They were caught up in the impeachment of the Attorney General, and this legislation didn't make it through, which creates an opportunity for us. Where is the gold stored for Glint? It's stored in London and in some other places. So it's not a question of storing it here. The best place to store it is probably in the state of Texas at the Texas Bullion Depository, but there are other opportunities with places like Brinks. But the alternative right now is London, which is where Glint has, as I understand it, most of their deposits right now. As far as it being a Ponzi scheme, I would say this is the opposite of the Ponzi scheme. This is gold. Gold on hand at a secure depository, which is insured by Lloyd's of London. The gold is not going to leave there. It would take a massive invasion to capture that gold and bring it away from there. Now, Representative Reiser talked about, concerned about people not understanding the risk, and of course that's the current law. You can do this now. But if anyone makes a deposit through the Department of Treasury, as John Broussard, in charge of our investments, said, there'll be all the appropriate legal disclosures to let them know of the risk of investing in gold or having your money in gold. So the multitude of questions, I think they're great answers to all the questions. We do think that this provides a tremendous opportunity for the state of Louisiana to do something very innovative, to bring billions of dollars potentially through the Treasury to have people's gold stored safely where they can access it whenever they choose, day or night.
All right, thank you. I do have a question from Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. What we discussed was what's different now between these other institutions and the cards you're talking about is you have to pay capital gains on those, any gains, or you have capital losses, depending on what it is. You know, we had some questions here about, gold not performing well. Do you know how much the dollar has lost in value since 1971?
Well, what I can tell you is that when I first came to this house in 1972, the gold was just a little over $35 an ounce. And today gold is just under $2,200 an ounce. Now, has gold really changed? Or has the dollar changed? I was just buying a candy bar 2 days ago. It was like a 5-cent candy bar and it was $3. I'm thinking, has candy really gone up like that, or is the value of our dollars going down? I think gold's really, in my opinion, very stable. It's the dollar, as we have deficits and create more money in the money supply, that it appears gold's going up. And this is one of the keys on the capital gains tax that I wanted to mention about somehow avoiding taxation. We're talking about paying taxes right now on things that are not real capital gains, because the gold is being denominated in more dollars, but it's not really worth any more. But yet you'd have to pay capital gains now on something that is not a real gain. It's an artificial gain. So this is a reason that this was a way to have people keep hold by having their money in gold, being able to access it, but not paying capital gains on what is not a real gain.
That's a good point, and that's a point I was wanting to make. So gold is seen as a store of value, is what it's seen. Over long term, gold has always been seen as a store of value. We're talking about investments and non-investments. Gold is never, anybody I've ever read, been anything but a store of value.
I read that a nice men's suit has always been about 1 ounce of gold.
Exactly, it's a store value. And so should you pay, the question is, my question is, should you pay taxes on when you don't have a gain, you just have a store value? And I think it's important that we change it to a currency so we offer that to the people. But my research shows that the dollars went down in value by 80% since 1971. 80%. The price of gold has increased by 51% since 1971. So I think a lot of the arguments here are not looking at this as a currency, as a value there that we offer to ordinary citizens. So anyhow, that's all I had to say.
Another thing I wanted to say, Representative McCormick, there were questions about on the crypto bill about would you have to have the license. Glad if they were chosen as the credit card provider, or any of them, would have to get the license under this legislation. And this is to make sure that we don't have money laundering and things like that. So this legislation is not part of the banking system, But it is part of the legal system, and it is part of the anti-money laundering system, so nobody's gonna avoid any of that when they make a gold deposit, if it's at the Texas Bullion Depository or elsewhere that might be chosen by the treasurer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
We've been, Mr. Cruz and I have now been asked to fill out a white card. We're happy to do so, but it's our understanding that we do not fill out white cards.
I think
I'm pretty much a proponent for what it is.
I think Representative Cruz is probably good with his statement, and it's my understanding a statewide elected official can come in and testify and install a green card. So I think you. We did get one from Representative Jenkins. So I think we square on the cords. We do have Mr. Mike Carter, who's present and would like to speak. In favor?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Mike Carter. I'm a citizen activist, and when they refer to things that are happening in Texas, I come here from Texas. I have no economic interest in any of the platforms that we're talking about today. I do have interest in making sure that Main Street America and everyday working Americans have an equal opportunity and equal chance with fair wage and measures in the monetary system. And offering a system like this, which is just another way to pay, which offers that hedge against inflation, is the solution that we see. I'm part of a solution to action tank, where we look at things of what's going on geopolitically, what's going on in terms of economic warfare, and what are the solutions that can be developed around that. Part of this is a brainchild that my business partner came up with. Kevin Freeman, who's a CFA, former Templeton money manager. He's debriefed all the three-letter agencies in DC on economic warfare, taught our departments on how to use it, and we also have other countries doing that. There clearly is an attack on the dollar. Other nations have said they want to de-dollarize America. And looking at alternative ways to pay is a critical component of what we look at there. The Treasurer's hearing from other people as well. We see Venmo, we see PayPal, we see Apple Pay, we see all these things happening out there. But what's unique about this, and I don't want to get too caught up in, well, do we have everything lined up right now in terms of do we have a legal opinion? We have talked with AG Paxton, who said he will work towards that as we look at that in Texas. I've helped facilitate this, and it's grown organically, not from anything that I've done per se, but we've had legislators from 25 states. I've had treasurers call me and ask me, tell me more about this. We want to understand what this is about and how to do it. I've had treasurers say, hey, maybe what we should do is we start working towards getting this thing across the finish line. We should form a kind of compact of the states and how we can work together on this. So let me be very clear, this is happening. I would love for Louisiana to lead with it, even as a Texan. We didn't get it done in legislation last year for the reasons you heard about already. What I will tell you is it was presented by a freshman representative who everybody said was impossible to get anywhere. We had 41 joint authors and co-sponsors, Democrats and Republicans that kind of were behind this. But we got all the way to the floor. We were 20 votes away from a floor count when they had the Speaker of the House that had a few little drinking issues and an impeachment issue that went on, and we did not get it done. We did just recently have a proposition in Texas, which passed with 77% of the vote. 1.6 million people said, yes, we want this to happen. As I look at Louisiana, as I got here last night and rented my car, I said, hey, maybe I can pay for this in gold next time I come to Louisiana. Like I said, what? And I just explained it to him. He goes, tell the legislators I want to see this happen. I'm driving through a drive-thru at Wendy's, and I thought, well, I might as well have fun. I'm here in Louisiana. How about if I pay for this in gold? Well, how would that work? And she stopped. She said, tell me more about this. Because what we're doing is we're liberating gold. No longer does it need to be hidden underneath your bed or buried in the ground out there somewhere. And we're creating velocity with gold. We're giving everybody a chance to buy gold now. You no longer have to be rich to buy gold if this legislation goes forward. I can buy as little as 5 cents worth of gold and get it on a platform. And that's, I can buy $10. I can start to save $50 a month and have a savings account there, or $100 a month, and let's say something happens, my car breaks down, I gotta fix the car. With traditional gold, I would have to go figure out how to go through a broker, sell that, what value I'm gonna get for it, and so forth. It's not easy. Now people have another way to pay, another way to have something that holds a store value, but it's transactional if it's needed out there. And I think as you look at this, you each have a chance literally to be heroes here. Because I've seen the bipartisan support. I see the groundswell across America. And are there some things that we need to come across legally and so forth? Is it gonna be for sure, according to IRS code, recognized as a currency? I believe absolutely so. If you look at the IRS code, it says if you can buy a stick of gum with it, if you can pay for your car with it, if you can pay for your taxes with it, it's currency, it's legal tender. And that meets the ground rules for everything that we're talking about here today. You look at the latest Biden executive order on central bank digital currencies. And in there, they looked at that and said central bank digital currency would not be taxed because it would be able to do those same things. So do I think the precedent is set there? Absolutely. Do I think from a constitutional standpoint, I heard questions earlier in terms of, can we make coin and all that kind of stuff. We have a book, we'd be happy to get each of you a copy of this, which goes through why this is constitutional, how the technology is there to implement this today, and why it's needed for the consumer today. This is a big idea for Louisiana. We've had other countries come to us and say, if Texas gets this done, we'd be interested in putting some of our money there because we're not quite sure about this China-based digital gold yuan. We see $34, $35 trillion of U.S. debt right now, and not quite sure what's going on from that, but if we had a state-backed currency that gives us comfort, we would put money into that. And that creates all kinds of economic opportunity. I'm encouraged by what Louisiana could do here. I know the Bankers Association is going to be coming up here next, and I challenge and hope that they will look and say, okay, how do we work together to come up and win with this? How does the state work together to make sure that our banks are able to issue these debit cards, are able to profit from this thing? Work with the treasurer who understands business and entrepreneurialism, can really lead with this thing. And I believe that Louisiana, like they say, has a chance to be an early adopter. Will you be the only one? Probably not. I will tell you, Utah just signed, their governor passed a bill for gold tender, legal tender bill. They're moving $140 million, their rainy day fund, into gold, and in the process of purchasing, looking at how to purchase that now. There's legislation in Louisiana with the same thing, looking at doing that. They're looking at putting that in the Texas Bullion Depository. I'm talking about $82 million. That's going through committees and so forth now. There's other states looking at this and saying, we definitely want to be on the leading ground of this for next year. Big states often aren't quite as nimble as smaller states. If I were Louisiana, I would say, how do we take the resources we have here and use that to our advantage? It's an opportunity for now. The technology is there. I will tell you, your constituents, once they understand it, they love it. This is a platform that you will want to run on. It's a stable store of value. Yes, it's not an investment. It's another way to pay, folks. I'm not looking for people to take all their savings and put it into gold. That's what they're going to do. The commerce is going to happen in dollars. Loans happen in dollars. We want this to protect the local and regional banks out there. That's the key to every economy out there. I'm an entrepreneur. There's a local bank that gave me my first loan to build my business. A big bank would not have done that. CBDCs, if that becomes the law of the land, I don't know where that's at. But that's going to push everything up to the top 6 big banks. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on the community banks here. This is where I think the opportunity is for the Banking Association, for Louisiana Treasurer, to pass this bill, get it out of committee. We can work through a lot of details. I understand there's a lot here. If you just heard it for the first time, you just walked in and you're presenting with legislation somewhere. Get it out of committee and work through these things. Figure out what the synergy is and figure out how Louisiana can lead. I will tell you, your constituents want this. They're looking for that stable store value. Representative Thomas, you asked about, will milk go down? And I had a guy come up to me from Argentina who saw inflation go from, 10%, 30%, 1,500%. And he tells me a story of how his mom would wait when the workers wanted to get their paychecks. They would grab the paycheck from their employer, run to his mom in the car, who went straight to the grocery store to buy whatever groceries they could afford to buy that day before the price goes up again another 1,300%. If they had a Louisiana transactional gold card, a gold currency platform, they don't have to worry about that, because that gold would be a stable, that gold would cost me the same in gold as it did the day before. That's the difference when we talk about hedge against inflation. That's the difference that people care about. That's the difference that they get and understand. And like I said, I encourage all of you, ask the questions. Good questions have been asked here today. But get this out of committee, work through how you can get to a solution, or say, hey, we don't want to leave it all this. We just want to be last. I'm from Texas. I don't care. I'd like to see Texas work, but I do appreciate entrepreneurial efforts. I appreciate the leadership team that I see here that's willing to take a more out-of-the-box approach. And I think you got the right team to lead with this if you guys decide to do that. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I see no questions, and we appreciate your testimony, sir. Next, we have Ms. Christy Hike with, she's RSCC 16A in Orpec District 7, and she would like to speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. You've heard all of the benefits of this bill, and the man from Texas, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, Mike Carter, he was right when he said that the constituents here in Louisiana, our constituents, are extremely concerned and would love nothing more than to see the passage of this bill. You've heard of the benefits and you've heard why you should pass it, and I'm sure the bankers will tell you why you shouldn't. But I would like to tell you why so many Louisiana residents feel that you must pass this bill and present a different perspective, potentially. Not only are we the one state not gaining population in the South, but we are losing citizens at an alarming rate. We are losing our best and brightest, your children and grandchildren. And why is that? There are a plethora of reasons as to why we have a mass exodus and no influx of people wanting to come here. Passing this bill would be a huge win for Louisiana and a huge draw for those looking to relocate to a state that offers them protections against an overreaching federal government. Other states have filed this legislation, as Representative Cruz listed, and the momentum is great, with still more interested in looking to do the same. Let's be the first to pass this legislation and the first to do something really positive to lead the nation. If we do not pass HB 714, we risk losing yet more residents to these other forward-looking states who may pass the legislation. The passage of Representative Amity's bill just recently, this morning, and this one would form an impenetrable barrier protecting Louisiana's currency and citizens' rights, and would be a very appealing enticement for anyone looking to move to a state where freedom still reigns. If you would like to stop the exodus and retain those who might otherwise flee, let's be first and pass HB 714. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hike. I don't see any questions. And next, we can hear from Mr. Joe Jiggin from the Louisiana Bankers Association. He's has a red card.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Joe Gengren here with the Louisiana Bankers Association. A lot has been said. I will try to keep my comments as concise as possible, and then, of course, we'll be happy to answer any questions. But we are here in opposition to the bill. If passed, it does create a government-sponsored payment system. It puts the state of Louisiana in the business of banking by taking deposits and issuing payment cards. I know it was said that this is not really banking, but taking deposits and issuing payment cards is a function of banking. So we believe strongly it is banking, and it would be a government-sponsored bank. If you just look at the one-liner of the bill, or the subject matter, banks and banking, that's why we're in this committee and that's why we're talking about it. And our country, as you all know, is based on a very strong private banking system. So anytime there are steps like this to create a public bank of any sort, it definitely draws a lot of concerns from us. This would, just to give you an idea of one of the main concerns, this state-backed program would incent this type of investment based on the arguments you heard today. That would reduce local deposits available in communities across Louisiana if people decide to use this program. And that's less money, less deposits that can be lent back out into the community and create economic development in your communities. It also, the more deposits that leave our state, that also impacts tax collections if that money is moved out of state. And look, our understanding of the bill is that this new wealth that's invested through this program will be residing in gold bars in a Texas depository. And that seems to be backed up by the testimony we heard. I will tell you that no state in the country has passed this. You heard about Texas. I do know it's been introduced in other places, but it hasn't passed. We talked to Florida last week. Apparently what we're told is the bill was introduced on the House and Senate side in Florida. It never even got a hearing. So just very clear, what they're trying to do has not been done. It's been stated many times, this is already being done in the private market from what we're told. So if you want to, we're not against investing in gold. If you want to invest in gold, you can do that today through the private market. Our concern is the government getting involved in this activity and incenting this investment through a state-sponsored entity. I think it might be helpful to give you a little background on the book that this is based on. And you did hear a lot of the arguments today, but I'll just respond on a couple points. The author of the book, at least in my reading of the book, seems to make two main points about why we need to look at this. So one of those is preparing for what he refers to as the Great Reset. That's when the government becomes, Fed government becomes more in control of our lives. There was talk about the central bank digital currency. That's part of the thesis of the book, is that this central bank digital currency will be inevitable and the government will have more control over our financial lives and our privacy. So just for the record, we also are against the central bank digital currency, and in fact banned it not once but twice today in this committee with the bills that you passed earlier. But on that note, I just want you to know that when we go to DC with our group of bankers, we talk about our opposition to the central bank digital currency every time we're there. And the concerns, in addition to privacy, that's another mechanism that could draw deposits away from our state and local governments to be held on the balance sheet of a central bank. And that's not good either, for all the reasons I described about those monies being relent into communities here for economic development. So also, just so you know, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, who was appointed under President Trump and now continues to serve under President Biden, he recently said to members of Congress in committee that we are not remotely close. A CBDC is not remotely close to be happening anytime soon. The general thought process, it would have to have approval of Congress anyway, if it ever were to materialize. But I just tell you all this, that instead of creating things like this as alternate payment system, let's just make sure that a central bank digital currency never happens and continue to fight against that at the federal level. On the other point, which has been talked about a lot, the capital gains piece, that seems to be the main driver of this. Again, you can do this in the private market already. They're saying if you do it this way, that you potentially can avoid capital gains. It's been talked about a lot. All I'll say is that this is based on one book that came out in 2023. And one man's opinion. Now maybe there's others that have shared his opinion now since he wrote his book, but this is a whole lot to ride on one person's book that came out less than a year ago. And all the questions that you all have asked is, what's the true cost of this to the state and the consumer? And it sounds like there has to be an appropriation to get it going. I know they say that there's fees that will be charged, but if the legislative auditor has to be involved in auditing the depository in Texas, auditing the third-party providers that the state will be working with, what are the fees to the consumer? And it seems to me there'll be transaction fees through the treasurer, the third-party providers, and ongoing storage costs at the depository. Are there limits on the fees? Is the state subject to any kind of regulatory body that can enforce a limitation on fees? It's just a lot of questions. I think I'll leave my comments at that, and of course we'll be happy to answer any questions the committee has, and my colleague David Benino's here as well.
All right. Thank you. We do have a couple questions. Representative Domingue, please, for a question.
Yes, and thank you so much for being here. Earlier it was stated that it got a little in the weeds, and I got a little confused as to what the intent of this bill actually was. It was stated that there was going to be a state-sponsored gold sale, and then later it was said that the banks were going to be in charge of the gold. And so is that something that the banking system here in Louisiana is ready and able to do?
Representative, I'll take that. So we've had a number of bankers that were able to meet with the treasurer and his staff to hear the pitch themselves. And then of course we've talked to many bankers since on this proposal. No banker that we have talked to supports this. Not one that I've talked to supports this idea. They think it's bad for Louisiana. They think it's bad for their local communities for the reasons I described earlier. And the way we view this is not something that is going to be somehow tapped into your local bank account. The way we understand it, you're going to make the purchase through the treasurer's office, and somebody on their behalf is going to buy the gold. The gold's going to be sitting in a warehouse or the depository. And at that point, I'm sure they do have to have at least one issuing bank to work with that can issue the debit cards. But our understanding was that, at least the way Glant currently operates, that's probably a larger out-of-state bank. But that's just one bank to issue cards. This is not something that your local banks will tap into based on everything that we've heard.
And just to clarify some comments that I heard earlier, not necessarily in your testimony, but some other testimony, today, if a Louisiana resident wants to invest in gold, are they able to do that?
That's our understanding.
And they can put all their resources in gold, and they can use one of these cards and
Right.
use that to maintain all of their business.
Our understanding is this process, and it was said, is already available to anybody that wants to invest in gold. It's just done through the private market. It seems the only benefit that they hope to get by doing this is some sort of capital gains exemption. But look, that's a capital gains exemption at the federal level. My question is, what are the odds that the feds would recognize that? And how much litigation and cost will it take to fight this theory by one person in one book?
David Benino with the Louisiana Bankers Association, also here in opposition to this bill. But to add on to what Joe just said to your question, as we try to get our hands around what exactly this is, because it's never been done before, and there's really not a lot of specifics, it's all concept and theory. You know, that's the one thing that we focus on, is that somehow this is going to be able to allow the state to rely on its state sovereignty to be able to issue this currency, and that is going to shield depositors from capital gains tax. We asked the proponents about this idea, asked for any sort of legal basis for that, and the only thing they could point to is a clause in the US Constitution. No legal opinion from any law firm anywhere in this country, no IRS ruling as to whether or not that transaction is taxable. All we have is this theory. And so, in my opinion, you're setting yourself for massive litigation that could be very costly to the taxpayers of this state and drag on for a long period of time. So the question is, even if you did try to go down that path, is that something that would happen in the middle of this program being stood up, or customers, citizens of Louisiana are caught up in this question about whether or not what they've done is now subjecting them to taxes that they did not think that they owed because they were under the belief that somehow this was giving them some special treatment. There's a lot of unresolved issues here that are, in our minds, very significant that make this whole thing seem a little premature until these issues are resolved, and it raises a lot of concerns.
Thank you. It raises a lot of concerns too. And I just want to end with the point that most of our citizens in Louisiana are not leaving Louisiana because they can't invest in gold. They're leaving for a multitude of other reasons that we're all here working diligently to fix, but this isn't one of them. So I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Representative McCormick with a question.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask the most obvious question. Y'all are here to represent the bankers, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Y'all not here to represent the citizens of this state. I mean, that's not your job. That's not what you're being paid to do. Isn't that correct?
I'll answer that. You know, I think the best way I can answer that, Representative, is the vast majority of our members are community banks.
Sure.
They've got community in their name. They're pivotal to their communities. They have been for decades. So when we get feedback that this is harmful to Louisiana communities, that's impactful to us.
And I understand that, but I want to make it clear I'm here to represent my constituents. And since we've been talking about this bill, we discussed it with constituents, and they're ecstatic about it. So, you know, let's talk about how this could negatively affect the banks, because in reality, that's, you know, whether you know, you know, I did hear y'all say one thing, that the only thing we have to base this on is the U.S. Constitution. Wasn't that your testimony?
I think it's, if it was said that way, that was inaccurate. It's based on a person's interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, which as we've talked about today, has not been litigated, no IRS determinations.
Well, the IRS doesn't determine what the Constitution says. I would assume that would have to go to the court system. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but I guess from the perspective of whether it's taxable, I don't know exactly the IRS's role, but yeah, I would think that it will go through the court system based on this person's interpretation of the law.
And let me ask you another question. We talked about lots of, you know, gold can go up and go down, but it's pretty much a guarantee if somebody's got US dollars in your bank, it will go down in value over a period of time. Isn't that, historically speaking, that's happened? I don't know, there may be a year somewhere in the past that it didn't, but historically speaking, the buying power of that dollar will decrease. Is that not correct?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. I mean, I would say that are you saying that gold could not go down?
No, I'm just talking about the dollar, I'm not talking about gold, no.
I can jump in and say, look, you know, that's a function of our economy and where we are. Are we an inflationary economy or recessionary economy? We could see prices go down as we contract, and it's happened over our history. So,
Are you saying since 1971 we've had deflation? Is that what you're saying?
I know we've had recessions.
Right.
And I know we've had prices on certain items go down in value cyclically.
You know,
I'm not here to testify as an economist for certain. So.
Sure, you bet. You know, I guess my concern is the only real threat I see this to the banking system, but everything else you said, I appreciate it, but the only real threat I see this to the banking system, and a concern that y'all should have, is it would be such a great opportunity for citizens. They may take dollars out of the bank and turn them into gold. I don't see any other legitimate threat besides that. Do y'all see any other legitimate threat besides that?
Well, again, Representative, we're not against people that want to invest in gold. They have that ability today if they want to hedge against inflation.
But they don't have that ability to possibly avoid capital gains, though.
It's the possibly part that's problematic, and then the way to.
But in reality, that's not the banker's problem, though. That's the investor's problem. That doesn't have anything to do with the Bankers Association, though, does it?
It does if that means that it's creating a state-sponsored banking entity, and if it also means that by promoting this based on something that may not materialize, that means more money leaving our state.
Yeah, and well, I can appreciate you saying that, but do you feel like you're in competition with the federal government? Because they have the ability to create kind of currency. So you feel like you're that they're in the banking business too?
Well, they can create currency, and the government heavily regulates banking, so I'll leave it at that. I don't know that I'd say they're in the banking business, but they heavily regulate the banking system.
Are y'all regulated by the Federal Reserve?
Bank holding companies are regulated by the Federal Reserve, and then there are some banks, the actual bank itself, that have the Fed, but there's also the FDIC as a federal regulator of most banks, and also another entity called the OCC for national banks.
In the Federal Reserve, a private bank itself?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer.
I'm sorry.
Is the Federal Reserve a private bank itself?
I think there's legislation that was passed to establish the Federal Reserve, so I think it's got some aspects of it that are not.
Yes, it's a private bank, yes. Thank you. Appreciate you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. I don't see any further questions. And Representative Cruz, would you like to close on the bill? I do have some cards I'm going to read in first. Thank you very much for reminding me. All right, John Broussard, State Treasury, President will provide information if requested. S. Callis, Louisiana Citizens Advocate Group, Green in support. Trinity Baker, Gene Mills, Louisiana Family Forum, present, does not wish to speak. Kimberly Smith is present, in support, not wishing to speak. Dr. Aaron Bittman, the Pelican Institute, present, in support, but not wishing to speak. Joseph Swallow, present, but not wishing to speak. Miss Susie Leberture. Labrie, I messed it up again, sorry. Present, doesn't wish to speak. Jill Hines, Health Freedom Louisiana, present, not wishing to speak. Ms. Connie Hare, Freedom Caucus, present, not wishing to speak. And in opposition, Donald Quintana, the Gulf Coast Bank and Trust. And we also have 20 written statements in support via email. I'm not going to read all of those out. All right, Representative Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, members, I appreciate you entertaining this issue for almost, 3 hours now. Been very inquisitive, asked a lot of good questions. I want to tell you, I think this bill, it reflects an historic opportunity. I think just from the testimony, it's pretty obvious it's coming somewhere. It's coming somewhere to a state near you. Once again, I would like us to be first. I can't imagine anybody, playing under Nick Saban thinking, you know what, why can't we just be second? I just don't think that would ever happen. I think winners have to make difficult choices. They have to take some paths that aren't clearly delineated sometimes, but they're important. More importantly, I think this is for the people. If they want to choose to do this, they can choose. If they don't want to, they don't have to. They can take advice from others. Hey, this is a bad idea, it's a good idea. They've got that opportunity, but what they do have with this is they would have freedom. freedom to decide which way and how they want to invest their own money. I've heard a lot of things here, talking about let's make sure CBDC just doesn't occur. I say let's put the tools in the citizens' hands. Let the citizens have an option instead of trying to regulate CBDC out here. Give the citizens an option that they can choose. I know no support, bankers say they support this. I've spoken with several that were intrigued. They wouldn't come right out and say, hey, we like it, but they're intrigued. But they, none of them were outright to me saying, oh, you know, I don't like this is bad. We can't do this. But I understand, you know, when you get collectives, you've got to kind of decide on an answer together and kind of see which way you want to go. And I know in the state of Louisiana, new things are hard. They're hard to take. I mean, particularly in our state, it's difficult to trailblaze new paths. But what about our constituents? What do they want? I have not spoken to one constituent yet that didn't like this idea. Matter of fact, several times I've been talking about this bill with somebody else, and a constituent overhears me and comes up to me and goes, you know, I've got a bunch of gold at home right now. I'd love to have something like this where it has stored at home. And I'm talking to people who work at the Capitol. A lot of the ones that are manning the doors and whatnot have come up to me and said, you know, that sounds like a good idea. I'd like to have that opportunity. I hear that local banks won't tap into this. I think that's completely contrary to what reality is. I mean, which local bank hasn't taken advantage of the MasterCard Visa ecosystem or Amex? I mean, they all do it. They realize there's opportunity there. I think there's opportunity for banks on this one. They said there's no ruling over theory. To Representative McCormick's comment, isn't the Constitution good enough? Shouldn't that be the foundation? Shouldn't that be where we start? Do we have to have courts rule on every issue before we can accept the Constitution at its face value? I mean, sure, there'll be tests, but why not use the primary source document, go from that first? I've heard this could be harmful to local communities, but I didn't hear how. That's the one thing I was really expecting to have a little more testimony on. I don't see how, unless there's a fear that our constituents think this might be a better place for their money, or at least part of their money. Do I see everybody putting all their money in there? No. Do I see them putting 10, 15%? Perhaps. Do I see that wage earner who doesn't have any type of investment account saying, you know what? I'm going to put $500 toward gold. My grandmother told me it was good. My grandfather. Yeah, I see that. And then I see a rough time coming, and then they go, well, I'm sure glad I didn't buy a stock or bond because I couldn't redeem that in time to take care of this car repair. But I can redeem this. I see us looking out for constituents with this. There's been a focus on capital gains tax here, and you know, are we really going to get that? I think a plain reading of the Constitution says, yeah, it's going to be money, it's currency, it's legal, it's functional. There's no reason it shouldn't be. But I think another question you ought to ask yourselves is our money being taken already? It is. Inflation takes the value of your money. Every day there's inflation. What you've earned, it chips away at the value of that. And that's why people do invest money and put money in other places to hedge against that. I heard that if you were paid in gold, and I think it was in 1930, the minimum wage, whenever it was instituted, I can't remember the year, if you were paid minimum wage in gold, that same gold today would be worth $130,000 a year. Who here would take gold instead of cash? I'd seriously consider it, particularly in any inflationary period. So the real question here is, do we want to step out? Do we want to step out and make a bold step for Louisiana and possibly have all kinds of businesses thinking, wow, Louisiana is a place to do business, and citizens thinking, this is a great place that's protecting my freedom. We've already been told our Constitution is one of the best in the country, and now we can prove it to the citizens that we're trying to protect every right. Every right. And one of your rights is to have and transact business in gold. So that, I'd like to ask your favorable passage.
All right, thank you, Representative. We did get a green card in support, and Mr. Walter Beach asked to speak, but you were already under close, so he will not be able to speak. But I just wanted to acknowledge that he was here. We appreciate you attending. All right, what is it, the will of the committee? That's what I was asking with the question. Is there a motion? Representative Noel, do you have a motion to report favorable or to? State your
I would like to make a motion to voluntarily defer. Well, I try to be courteous to my colleagues and voluntarily defer, but the will of the committee is to involuntarily defer.
So let's take up your first motion, which was to voluntarily defer. Any objections to that motion?
I object. Explain the motion.
Okay, so
My motion-
Representative Well would like to voluntarily defer.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is that against the will of the member to voluntarily defer his bill?
So, Representative Cruz, would you like your bill voluntary deferred or involuntary deferred? That's
I
your
would like to
choice.
report it favorably.
That's why the motion is voluntary and involuntary.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking for clarity. If it's against the member's wishes that his bill be voluntarily deferred, then that's by definition under the rules an involuntarily deferral.
We were just trying to be polite, but if that's what you'd like to do, the motion is now to
I would
involuntary,
like to make a substitute motion.
involuntary defer House Bill 714. And we have a substitute motion from Representative McCormick.
I'd like to make a motion to move it, to report it unfavorably to the House floor.
What?
So the motion is to report it unfavorably, which means that we will be debated on the House floor. So go ahead, why don't you explain that to us, Ms. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. A motion to report the bill unfavorably would send the bill to the House floor with the intention to have the bill withdrawn from the files of the House.
Is that what you would like to do, Representative McCormick?
No, thank you.
So would you?
Let me, yes, I do want to do that, yes.
So Representative McCormick withdraws his motion to report House Bill 714 unfavorably. Yes, he withdrew his motion.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't want to withdraw my motion. I'm confusing myself and you, I apologize, but no, I don't want to withdraw my motion. So my motion is to report it unfavorably to the House floor.
Which means that, Ms. Reed, one more time, just to make sure everybody understands.
To support that motion would be to send the bill to the House floor with the intention to withdraw the bill from the files of the House. If you vote yes, you would be voting to send it to the House floor with the intention to withdraw the bill from the files of the House. A vote yes.
That's what I was about to ask.
Okay.
But no, but that's a very good question. So can you,
I would have to consult the House rules with the House clerk.
and I think, let's
Give me a moment.
Let me withdraw that motion and make another one.
all right, Representative McCormick is withdrawing his motion, and we have a difference there.
Move to report to the House floor without action.
That was the motion I was actually describing whenever I first, and I thought that's what you
I
wanted to do.
apologize.
So does everybody, okay, we do have an objection to the substitute motion. Okay, so we had a set of amendments that were adopted, so we cannot report without action. Because I think we took action.
So with amendments, then is my motion.
All right, so we do have an objection from Representative Reiser.
What's your motion?
Okay, so
Report with amendments? Is that the motion?
without action.
Without action, yes.
No.
With amendments.
No. Report with amendments.
So report with amendments. So you're basically voting on the bill.
Yeah.
And then you'll object.
Yep, and Neil objected to that motion.
Okay, so we had. So, I had, okay, I'm confused. I had a motion to voluntarily defer because I like to respect my colleagues. Representative Green made a substitute motion to involuntarily defer, and then there was just discussion on the involuntarily deferment. A point of order on it, so no other motion, and then we had a substitute motion to report it favorably that was then objected to by Representative Rice.
It was a motion to report with amendments.
With amendments favorably.
Well,
that
just
was-
with amendments.
That was just objected to.
Yes.
And Representative Rice objected to that, so a vote yes is for the bill, a vote no is against the bill.
Okay.
We go back to your.
And then we go back to the original motion.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
So does everybody understand what they're voting on?
Right, yes.
Rep. Green,
He had a point of order.
he had a point of order. And then did you?
I didn't
make a
change
motion
it.
to involuntarily?
I made the motion to voluntarily defer the bill, which would leave it in committee.
And Representative Green, go ahead and explain what you.
So, Newell, the author does
We
not.
had this discussion on the floor, and I told you I was going to go with voluntarily defer only because, unlike some of us, I have respect for my colleagues and not to be as disrespectful as to involuntarily defer their bill. So that is why I made the motion to voluntarily defer, which would leave the bill here in committee. It would take a 2/3 vote of this committee to have the hearing on it again, which I doubt any of us have the appetite for. An involuntary deferral would mean that he cannot bring his bill up at any moment in time during this session until all the other matters that we have heard in this committee have been heard. So that's gonna be around me. So, I'm leaving my motion as a voluntarily deferral. Now, if you want to make a substitute motion to involuntarily defer, you are more than welcome.
Okay, all right, members, let's just let all that, Ms. Reed, repeat what she just told me, but I do understand it's a great mistake.
I was pulled away because someone sent word to the clerk that she needed to call me. So I missed part of what was going on, but from what I understand, we still have a prevailing motion on the floor, which is the motion to report with amendments by Representative McCormick. Is that the case?
That is accurate.
So that's the motion that we need to take up at this moment.
So, does everybody understand what the yes vote does and what the no vote does? Okay,
So a yes vote would be to report with amendments, and a no vote would be to not report with amendments.
all right, Ms. Stevens, call it, please.
Representative Boyd? No. Representative Carter?
No.
No. Representative Cox?
No.
No. Representative Davis?
No.
No. Representative Domain?
No.
No. Representative Green?
No.
No. Representative Abear?
No.
No. Representative Hilpity?
No.
No. Representative Jordan?
No.
No. Representative Knox? No. Representative Landry?
No.
No. Representative McCormick?
Yes.
Yes. Representative McBacon?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Mina?
No.
No. Representative Noel?
No.
No. Representative Reiser?
No.
No. Representative St. Blanc?
No.
No. Representative Thomas?
No.
No.
16 noes and 2 yeas. So now we'll take up, now we'll take up Rep. Newell's motion to voluntarily defer.
I'd like to give Representative Cruz the opportunity to voluntarily defer.
It sounds like a pretty good option at this point.
All right, Representative Cruz, makes a motion, would like to voluntarily defer, and, which actually Newell offered it, Representative Newell offered it, so I think it was just giving him the opportunity to say that, he appreciates your hospitality on the committee, and, that he looks forward to hearing it, again one day.
I appreciate that, and thank you to the treasurer for coming and supporting this issue and all the people behind me, and thank y'all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.